this is a video on remaining fresh while doing video presentations. Elsewhere, there is advice on how to light and edit and present professional videos. This time we're focusing very specifically on one thing, which is how do you try and stay fresh and appear confident in what you say. And it's ironic that I've just managed to entirely stuff up this section twice, which of course I have deleted and started again with this version, which will hopefully go better. But I think that gives you a good tip as to how the professionals do it, is we have the advantage of the redo and the backspace and the undo button. We can try things, we can experiment. If it doesn't work out, we can start again, and no one actually gets to see where we went wrong. All right, so how do you sound fresh? And I'm not pretending to be an expert in this field, of course, but this is something that I have struggled with myself, and I'd like to share some of the experiences I've had to try and help you in your own journey into becoming a better video presenter. Now, we all know when this goes wrong, and one of the worst things you can do when presenting a video is to read a prepared document, where you put your head down and you read very robotically from the text. And I understand completely why people do this, and it's a problem because it doesn't demonstrate confidence and it doesn't demonstrate knowledge in your material. It basically could be a robot reading your material. You're not putting yourself in as part of that. And I think one of the things as a professional you need to be able to do, and everyone will have different expectations as to the casualness and formality of your presentation, but is to the ability to sound fresh. The ability to sound like you're just coming up with these ideas completely as you're saying them, as a person who is brilliantly able to synthesize ideas on the hop, not someone who has spent ages coming up with and preparing and crafting this idea. A good example of this, I think, is stand-up comedians. And you'll notice stand-up comedians will often throw into jokes that sound like they've just come up with something clever, and they go, you know what? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, they've done this every night for the last 100 nights that they've delivered the show. But every time they've delivered it as though you in the audience are getting this special insight from this great new joke or idea they've just thought up. And that's, I think, part of the trick. It's a bit of sleight of hand, but it's that appearance that you have come up with something new and exciting and unique for a particular audience, whether it be on video or a spoken presentation live, that shows you to be a confident person, and therefore to be someone who knows what they're talking about, because confident people, even if they don't know what they're talking about, seem to know what they're talking about. All right, so it has a lot to do with confidence. And we can do various things to enhance our confidence. The first of which is obviously preparation. Hi, this is a video on remaining fresh while doing video presentations. Elsewhere, there is advice on how to light and edit and present professional videos. This time we're focusing very specifically on one thing, which is how do you try and stay fresh and appear confident in what you say. And it's ironic that I've just managed to entirely stuff up this section twice, which of course I have deleted and started again with this version, which will hopefully go better. But I think that gives you a good tip as to how the professionals do it, is we have the advantage of the redo and the backspace and the undo button. We can try things, we can experiment. If it doesn't work out, we can start again, and no one actually gets to see where we went wrong. All right, so how do you sound fresh? And I'm not pretending to be an expert in this field, of course, but this is something that I have struggled with myself, and I'd like to share some of the experiences I've had to try and help you in your own journey into becoming a better video presenter. Now, we all know when this goes wrong, and one of the worst things you can do when presenting a video is to read a prepared document, where you put your head down and you read very robotically from the text. And I understand completely why people do this, and it's a problem because it doesn't demonstrate confidence and it doesn't demonstrate knowledge in your material. It basically could be a robot reading your material. You're not putting yourself in as part of that. And I think one of the things as a professional you need to be able to do, and everyone will have different expectations as to the casualness and formality of your presentation, but is to the ability to sound fresh. The ability to sound like you're just coming up with these ideas completely as you're saying them, as a person who is brilliantly able to synthesize ideas on the hop, not someone who has spent ages coming up with and preparing and crafting this idea. A good example of this, I think, is stand-up comedians. And you'll notice stand-up comedians will often throw into jokes that sound like they've just come up with something clever, and they go, you know what? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, they've done this every night for the last 100 nights that they've delivered the show. But every time they've delivered it as though you in the audience are getting this special insight from this great new joke or idea they've just thought up. And that's, I think, part of the trick. It's a bit of sleight of hand, but it's that appearance that you have come up with something new and exciting and unique for a particular audience, whether it be on video or a spoken presentation live, that shows you to be a confident person, and therefore to be someone who knows what they're talking about, because confident people, even if they don't know what they're talking about, seem to know what they're talking about. All right, so it has a lot to do with confidence, and we can do various things to enhance our confidence. The first of which is obviously preparation. We need solid preparation if we are to appear to be casually confident and knowledgeable, to appear that we've just have a mastery of the knowledge, rather than to show the sweating that we've done to get there. You'll also notice that I just put an insert in there, that I've just edited the video. And it may be something you noticed as jarring, but I don't think anyone was going to criticize that. So the next thing you can do to enhance your confidence is the undo button. When something goes wrong, as it just did, there was a flock of cockatoos just flew overhead and made a really awful noise, which I think came out on the microphone. You just cut and insert a new piece there. If you like, you can put in a fancy transition or something to sort of show that you're making a transition, but I think most people just accept cuts in videos, and then no one's going to say, hey, that was discontinuous. You obviously cut into your video. We do it all the time in the news media now, and people are used to it. So, first of all, preparation. Second of all, the ability to hit the undo button, to reshoot, to put new material in. And the third is practice. And practice is something which is important for every field of life. And it's one of those things that I know as a student you're impatient to get out there and start practicing and experience the professional world. But sometimes it's about the hard yards. You don't get to be Jackie Chan straight away. You have to spend years of practice and practice and practice to get things right. All right, so these are the things that obviously, and they're easier said than done. These are the things that enhance confidence. But it can be useful to think about what are the things that undermine our confidence. And this can be different for everyone, but there's usually a combination of these things. The first is overthinking. When you're in the middle of something, there is a critical commentary going on in your head. There's that part of your internal voice which talks about, gives you feedback on what you're doing. And this can often lead to overthinking, and it can lead into the situation where your brain literally goes into stall because you spend too much time thinking, this is the idea that I'm saying here now. Was that the right way to say that? And you start overthinking things, and very soon you've got into an loop, or you've just frozen up and you can't go any further. So avoid that. If you find yourself overthinking something, there's nothing wrong with stopping, starting again, cutting in a new piece of video, or whatever you need to do to avoid that situation. But be aware of it. Be aware that you can be your own worst enemy when that critical voice kicks in the middle of something that you're trying to concentrate on. The next item that I think undermines confidence is shame. And a lot of us feel a distinct sense of vulnerability at seeing our image, and particularly hearing our voice and going, oh my God, is that what I sound like? Is that what I look like? Do I really say like that? Do I really talk that way? And again, this is something which is largely overcome with practice, and it's something which is very important to overcome. It never entirely goes away. I think only sociopaths aren't really concerned about the way they appear to other people. But be aware that everyone has that. And often people who you think are fantastic, who are great communicators, great performers, whatever, are undermined by doubts about themselves and the way they look and the way in which they sound. So don't think it's just you. Everyone goes through it, but build that resilience. Do the videos, watch them again. overcome that period, and it does get better. You overcome that period where you just see the videos and you go, oh God, I look like an idiot. I sound stupid. Is my voice that nasal? Work through it. Work through it. Come through to the other side. You'll be more confident for it. And at the very least, you'll just be used to the sound of your own voice. It won't be as unusual. Linked to that, another thing that undermines our confidence is uncertainty. That fear of something that's new. And the part of, again, the idea of practice is you familiarize yourself with things new. If you're doing a video and it's like, I've never done this before, I've only done this once before, I'm feeling very uncertain about it, of course, the more you've done it, the more you'll be able to go, oh, this is another video, I've done these before. And every time I do them, get a little bit better. And I learn from the mistakes that I make. And the last thing I'd mention in terms of undermining confidence is fear of failure. And we tend to exaggerate the feeling of what could possibly happen, what disaster would happen. And sometimes it's about reality checking and saying, well, what really is the worst thing that could go wrong here? I'm going to do a crappy video. Someone may snigger at me or post a nasty comment there, but it really isn't the end of the world. And it's something that at the end of the day, we're going to be annoyed if someone says, oh, you look like an idiot in your video. But real people don't do that. Real people don't post that. The people who do those sort of things are just trolls, and ignore them because, you know, they've obviously got something awfully wrong in their life to make them trolls. So, you know, they're not worth worrying about. All right, so here's some tips in no particular order of things to think about and ideas to consider when doing videos. First of all, expect to be nervous. Don't think that the people who are confident, who do it a lot, are people who are used to performing to the point at which it doesn't affect them anymore. What you can do, there's a very, I think, useful trick that someone pointed out to me, is the emotional positions of being nervous and excited are very, very similar. So rather than tell yourself, and this works for lots of different scenarios, rather than tell yourself, God, I'm really nervous about this, say to yourself, I'm really excited about this, because the feelings are pretty much indistinguishable. So if you can say, instead of saying, look, I'm really nervous about doing this presentation, I think I'm going to stuff it up, and you can turn those feelings into saying, I'm really excited about doing this presentation because this is something new, it's interesting, and I'm going to learn something from it. You can somehow fool yourself. Even though you know you're doing this to fool yourself, you can fool yourself into being more confident. And that can apply to a lot of things. It can apply to job interviews. It can apply to asking someone out on a date. It can apply to a lot of such scenarios. So don't, when you feel yourself thinking, oh, I am so nervous, say to yourself, hey, I'm so excited. This is something new. This is something different. This is an adventure. You only get to live once, and that will help you through. I've heard an old-fashioned theatrical term of making the butterflies fly in formation. You've got butterflies in the stomach, and you make them fly in formation. It's about mastery of that state, but it's not about not having that state. You know, being brave is not about not being scared. It's about not acting under that fear. Being confident is about not being nervous. It's about not letting that nervousness undermine what you do. All right, so it's a small shift in perspective. I've found it very useful. Hopefully, it'll help you too. Next point, never write a full script. I'll attach a link to the running sheet I've got for this particular video below. I work from fairly rough notes. How comprehensive your notes are will depend on you personally. Some people work from very, very scant notes. Some work from more comprehensive ones. You've got to find your own balance for yourself. But I'll show you what I've become comfortable with, and that will hopefully give you an idea of how I work, and then you can think about what you'd be comfortable with. So you need enough there that you have something to fall back on, that you've done your preparation, and you can go, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but you don't have so much that you sit there and you read from it, and you go to the next point, and you go to the next point, and you're clearly reading. Now you can print them out. I, to my shame, kill trees every time I do one of these videos because I think it's important to have it in front of me. But I know there's software you can get for your tablets that'll turn them into an auto cue, that'll run through these sort of running sheets or scripts automatically. Find out what works for you. Next point, know your material. Being confident is about knowing your material and being realistic about the fact that you know your material. Everyone can find holes in your knowledge if you really try and you go, well, I haven't read this, I haven't read that, I'm not really prepared. But have a realistic appraisal and say, yeah, I know the material, it's okay, it'll be fine going forward. And make sure you are prepared. I mean, there's no point in reassuring yourself that you are prepared and you know the material if you don't. But if you do know the material, don't let that critical voice in your head undermine that. Be enthusiastic about it. Even if the topic is not one that you find terribly interesting, find the bit of it that is interesting. Find the core of something that you can actually turn into an interesting story or an interesting perspective, and then get enthused about that and present that in that way. And that's particularly in law becomes very important. You know, maybe you don't live for equitable estoppel, but hey, there's some interesting cases in equitable estoppel, and when you actually look at the principles, there's actually something really interesting going on there. Good presenters can find something interesting in anything, because everything is interesting if you find the right part of it. So find that interesting thing to hang your hat on and work from there. Aim for short segments. These videos are a little bit rambly. I'm a little bit rambly in the way I deliver. I know we're supposed to, in the internet age, aim for 7 minutes for videos. I tend to go on a little bit longer than that. But if you are finding yourself getting into trouble in your videos, aim your segments for a half page. Aim for 4 or 5 minutes maybe for each section. Or shorter sections if you like. Or if you are being more scrupulous. I mean, I just mispronounced the word section just then. And if I was being very, very scrupulous about this as a video, I would be going back and I'd be re-recording that. But I'm more casual in this format. And just to prove the point, I've sneezed. I'm going to leave that in there to show you how casual I'm being. But equally, I could go back, and if I was shooting in small segments, then I wouldn't have spoiled a whole run. I'd be able to maintain that particular rhythm and go back to that point before I sneezed, before I stuffed up the pronunciation of the word, and then reshoot that section so I don't have to reshoot the whole thing from the start every time I make a mistake 5-10 minutes into the piece. Then you can join those segments together relatively easy, and that leads to the next point, which is learn to edit. Use your editing software to edit. Even if you don't use the editing software all that often, the fact that you've got it there makes you more confident, because you say, well, what's the worst can happen? I can make a mistake, I could mispronounce a word, I could sneeze in the middle of a podcast, and I'll just go in and take that out later. Or not, if you're going to be casual and slack like I've just been. Alright, if you don't like the way something's coming out, redo it. Go back, do it again, but don't keep redoing the same piece of material. And this helps if you've broken a presentation, even a 5-minute presentation, you've broken into 3 chunks, and you're finding you're just really not really nailing that first section. Don't keep doing that first section. Go on to the second section, do the third section, then come back, have another look at what you did with the first section, and start again, because you can actually get yourself quite frustrated by just constantly redoing again and again. This is something I used to do back in the day an awful lot. I'd restart videos 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It was quite maddening, and it took me a lot to get out of that block and to stop and to get myself of confidence in the fact that there's going to be imperfections and there's going to be little bits of mistakes all the way through. And if I make a big mistake, if I give the wrong citation or I say something completely wrong, I can take that out. But it's really no harm, no foul if there's some of those little imperfections in there. Now, I'm now waiting to see heaps of comments under there where people say, I hated this, I hated the sneeze, I hated the way this, I expect you to be perfect. I used to say a lot in my videos. And if you see some of my earlier videos, there's this all the way through. And I got critical comments on that. Got feedback from people saying, stop saying it's driving us crazy. And that was something I didn't like, getting that kind of feedback. I didn't realise I was doing it, but I took it on board and realised that I could develop strategies to stop me doing that. And the next point is get out of those cycles. Find out what makes you And I think one of the things that makes me is when my brain is running faster than the script, and I'm overthinking and I'm thinking through to the next 3 or 4 points. before I finish the point that I'm doing here. And what happens is I start thinking about the how this is working in terms of how I'm going to be talking about, and then I've lost the plot. I'm using as a placeholder to try and reposition my brain to the point of the script where I'm supposed to be. So if you're getting into an cycle, just stop, cut that bit out, start that bit again, or do the next piece and come back to it. But a few like that one, I don't think is such a bad thing. I think an that shows a bit of critical reflection, a bit of thought, a bit of a joinder between sections is not so bad. But you a lot, you're going to drive people crazy. Similarly, be on the lookout for waffle cycles. Something is a sin that I'm still very prone to, hence my videos often go to 15-20 minutes. An indulgence of the academic in the world where I should be aiming for 7 to 10 minutes. And part of it sometimes comes from getting into those waffle cycles. And a part of that is not having as tight a script as others would use. And part of that is when I start coming up with ideas along the way and restating and thinking, did everyone get that idea? Do I need to go through it again? And of course, if the audience hasn't got the idea on a video, they can rewind the video and listen to that bit again. So it's not like a live lecture where you are constantly reinforcing the same ideas. Be concise. When you start waffling, it's time to stop the recording, go back to the previous marker point where you think you were going okay before you went off track, and start again from there. A few more points to go. Breathe. It's okay to leave air in the conversation. You get to a point, and there's a break. Wait. Now, let's go on to the next point. Isn't a problem. If you do find that you're overusing pauses, someone will tell you about it. It's okay. You'll get that feedback. But I think the worst situation is more common, which is where people are just going and going and going and going, and they're not breathing and they're not whatever, and they're going to get to the point, and then they've got to start again. Right? Okay. So make sure you maintain steady breathing throughout. There's lots of advice generally on breathing. Similarly, on preparing your voice before you start. Lots of people do who are professionals have different things they do to warm their voice up with the la 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 la's or different tongue twisters they use. But it's generally a bad idea to start talking as just after you've hit start on recording. Generally, you're going to want to talk even some nonsense at the camera before you hit record to make sure your voice is a little bit warmed up before you start. Otherwise, you get into trouble pretty quickly. Get feedback. Next point, get feedback. Get yourself a critical friend. And what I mean is someone who is a realistically critical person, who knows you, who likes you, who is going to give you good feedback. And we're going to talk about feedback in the next unit of the module of the unit coming up. But you don't want someone who's just going to tell you you're fabulous, because we're not always fabulous. So you want someone who's going to be able to deliver the bad news along with the good news, tell you what's good and what's bad, and deliver it in a way that, because they know you, that it's appropriate. So they're not just going to abuse you like an internet troll would because you use too many ums, but who can actually know you and respect you enough to say, you know what, there probably are a few too many ums there. Have you thought about using some strategies to avoid those? Okay, few more points to go. Remember that confident people are faking it as well. Okay, this comes back to the very first point we made. But people who you like, who you think are really confident, who are really good speakers, they're all dealing with the same issues you have. You know, people who are great orators. It doesn't come naturally, I don't think, to anyone really, even really, really great speakers. And you can learn a lot by studying what those people do. In the video format, there are lots of great people on YouTube. The people who I particularly admire, Thomas Frank, Tom Scott, Derek Muller. I'll put some links below to their YouTube channels. I watch what they do all the time, and I look at the little tricks that they use to present and to speak in a certain way. And you'll have your own people who you admire. And I think getting into people who deliver interesting knowledge-based YouTube channels is a really good thing, and it's a good way of you learning from what other people do, how they present information, how they present themselves. I do notice that list of 3 are all boys, and the field of YouTube videos is very much dominated by boys at the moment. Please, if you've got recommendations of female YouTubers who you think are great, place them below. I'd be more than pleased to check them out. But the 3 who I find to be really good and really interesting are all guys at the moment. So I think that will change over time. Coming back to the last 2 points on being confident and staying fresh, and of course this video has gone well over its fresh point by now. I'm not sure what it is, but it's well over it. Last 2 points. Practice is the second last one. Practice, 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 practice. The only way you're going to overcome those negative things that undermine your confidence is through practice. Find ways in which you can practice. Look for assignment exercises that will allow you to present in a different way. So rather than doing a written paper, to do maybe partially as a written paper and also as a video presentation. Be on the lookout for opportunities. If you've got a hobby you're particularly interested in, you could always start your own podcast or video podcast around that particular hobby. Not just because you enjoy that hobby, but also to practice those skills so that when you come to present, you're going to be much more confident. And the very last point here is to remember that going into the 21st century, lawyers are going to need to communicate in lots of different channels. Law is fundamentally a communication profession. It's all about communicating with people. Video is going to be one of them. So if you can start now at the start of your career to develop those skills, that's going to pay off later on when this becomes a much more predominant way of communicating with clients and communicating with other people. So hopefully there's some things there for you to think about. Hopefully there are things there that are going to be useful to you, and good luck with going out and creating those videos for yourself.